So, hello everyone, and welcome to the first real episode of the AppConsult video podcast. I hope everyone.
You keep cutting off.
Okay, sorry, technical glitches. Now everything should be sorted out. So let's start again. So hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of the AppConsult video podcast. In our social channels, we have shared the episode that we recorded the last time, but it was kind of an internal experimental episode where hopefully if you have followed that one, you now know more about the AppConsult team. I hope everyone is safe. And today we are here to talk about two things. The first one and the main topic will be DevOps. And then we will share a bit about build and specifically what the AppConsult team is doing. I'm Matteo. I'm part of the Windows AppConsult, and I'm here with my friend Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. The weather is a bit sad today, but fine. We need to stay in the house, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, well, I think you're used to that now. Like we are.
Yeah, pretty much, almost 2 months. So yeah, I would say yes. Okay, let's start immediately with the content, with the technical stuff. And we said today that we want to talk today about DevOps. Why? Why, Mark, we want to talk about DevOps today?
Well, yeah, so everybody who's in the software engineering business for a couple of years now knows the, let's say, old approach where you had like, for example, a year or two for a new version of the product, and then you were just doing the planning for maybe half a year, and then you were just do the first iteration, and then finally you had basically done your coding, done your testing and stabilizing, and you are surprisingly in time. But then already, so okay, we are in the schedule and would like to know how it's going and send it out to alpha or beta testers, and then you get the first feedback. And the customers tell you, well, almost, but we lack feature X, Y, Z, and feature A is not the way we're expecting it. And you figure out, well, you didn't get it quite right, but you don't have actually the time to iterate on that feedback and make the product better because your life cycles are now too long and too stable to work on the feedback. So
it's also hard to ask feedback to the customer because you are not giving to the customer a small feature to test and to try, but you are giving him a monolithic complete application, test and give me your feedback, and then the customer has to find every corner case, every feature, every implementation. So yeah,
exactly. And that's why the people have this figured out a couple of years ago. And before we started the podcast, we just found a book in my bookshelf, which is Continuous Delivery by Fowler and Jess Humble. It's pretty well known, and this one is from 2011. So we are almost 10 years into the flexible approach. And the idea basically is to have smaller cycles and not just doing this 2 years or 1 year waterfall approach, but instead you have very short life cycles where you do the planning, the coding, the building, the testing, the releasing, deploying, operating, monitoring, and then you are once around and then you just start again. And by having those life cycles for like a month or 3 months, you can reiterate on the feedback much quicker. This obviously requires different cultural approach for both the teams and the organization.
That's exactly the point, because often people talk about DevOps in terms of tools and platforms and technologies, but in the end, the first step into DevOps is the culture, the mindset of the development team, the mindset of the operational team, the mindset of the customer. It's a very complex process. And as you said, we are seeing a surge in the latest months, years about DevOps, the interest around DevOps. Platforms like Azure DevOps, GitHub is adding more and more features for the DevOps implementation, but in the end, the overall idea behind the DevOps is not new. We are talking about agile development, testing, and all these practices since a long time in the development space.
Yeah, I think also like a big new mindset, or for the team, a big big shift is to have this shared responsibility for their code and for their releases, because the old approach is basically you are just the code monkey, you just write your code. If you're good, you even write a unit test or two, but basically that's it. And obviously maintaining the product wasn't really like something you wanted to do, because you just gave it to other teams and they will do with it whatever they want to do. And now the idea is basically embracing the feedback and try to have all the resources within the team, and everybody is basically similar responsibility. Wait a minute, which was the word? It's responsible for the. Yeah, sorry, my bad. I'm not a native speaker.
It's Monday for everyone. Sorry, Mark. I mean, we understand it's Monday for everyone. So
yeah. So and everybody is similar responsible for the entire product and for the entire product life cycle. So even the designer and the developer have to take into account that the product needs to be released at some point, and also needs to be maintained at some point, and also needs to deliver feedback so you can reiterate in the next cycle and stuff like that. So
I worked with a customer on a DevOps project for desktop applications where the goal was exactly that. So they had a lot of internal business applications that in the past they are developed by different teams, and in the past the approach was from each team, I build the app here, they gave it to the operational team, and I don't care anything. That's my job is done. Now instead the goal they are trying to enable is to make the development teams more responsible of the whole chain of the application, so that they can deploy, they can update, and so on. So
I have a similar story to share, because I was asked by a mobile team to go through their code and improve their basically their own workflow. And I was on site, so it was a couple of years ago already. And so they were sitting next room to operations. They were just building a mobile app, but the whole building process was very, very, very slow, and the deployment to the store was also very, very slow, and the testing itself. And this was basically because it was really like the teams were like just working against each other. It's not like they are like, okay, look, we have this, but keep in mind we have changed that and that, so you need to figure that out. But no, they were like, no, they just work against us anyway. So, and this was basically one of my first approach, like talking to both teams and see where they can come to a single table and discuss the issues, because this is the first step to just basically start talking and work together.
This reminds me a lot about the two books, the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project, which if you have never read them, I highly suggest to do it, because they're really good. They are basically stories, so it's not a technical book. They both tell a story from different point of views, but during this story you will learn all the common mistakes that companies are doing today with the traditional development approach, how they fix them with DevOps. It's a really, really good read. Very entertaining, and at the same time, it's a good learning experience, especially if you don't, you are not an expert on DevOps. You still need to understand the full value.
Now that you're talking about the Phoenix project, because for preparation for this podcast, I took some numbers from exactly that book, and they were comparing basically the deploying frequency of tech companies and against traditional enterprises. And they, for example, took Amazon, which does like a whopping of 23,000 deployments a day. I mean, like, obviously Twitter is a bit slower with maybe 3 a week. Google is with 5,500 a day, a bit obviously more on the upper end. Facebook with 1 a day at the lower end, but still they have basically like a lead time of minutes or hours, and their reliability is still very high. And with those short cycles, their responsiveness for customer issues and stuff like that is very high.
If you deploy faster, it means that you deploy smaller parts. Yes. So it's hard that a small deployment breaks the whole application. It can happen, but for sure, the chances that you break something are much smaller than if you are deploying 9 months of work at the same time. And also getting feedback. It's much easier. Getting meaningful data about the impact of the feature you released is easier because you're not deploying 20 features at the same time. You need to focus on monitoring only one. So yeah.
Exactly, and this is basically the point. I mean, like if you get the feedback like immediately, like minutes after, because they also do a great job of monitoring all their services and web front ends. And if they get the feedback that stuff is not working, they can react within minutes or hours. So obviously, this requires you to monitor this continuously and have all the data and put those data into meaning, because like just having the data doesn't really help you spotting the errors. But so that would be that would be results. So shorter cycle times, faster value delivery, improved quality of the code and of the deliveries. And of course, and you said it before, it's more or less a resource optimization as well, since you now have the teams sticking close together. You don't have the days of handover anymore, because like the teams are very coherent, and so it should work. It should improve the output and the quality of your software products, basically.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest value here is that these are not just theoretical information. There are a lot of researches. Also, the Phoenix project and the Unicorn project are built on top of real data, real scenarios. So there are researches and documents and studies which prove how enabling a DevOps culture helps you and your company to release faster, to address feedback faster, to save money, and so on. So I really like the definition that Donovan Brown from Microsoft gave about the value of DevOps, which is the ultimate goal of DevOps should be to continuously delivering value to your customers. So it's the union of processes, tools, mindset, but the final goal is not technical. So the goal is not do X number of deployments per day, or do test coverage until 99%. It's continuously delivering value to your users, and this value changes based on your project, because every project has different value, has different goals. So yeah.
And obviously, you're striving to continuously improve your processes as well. It's not that like you start with, I don't know, like 99%. I mean, 99% testing is obviously still not really achievable. But maybe you start with 60%, or you start with, I don't know, like 15 feature deliveries per year, and the next year you've improved your processes and stuff, and then you get better and better and better and better, basically with each sprint. That is the idea.
Plus, since the value changes based on the project, it's not granted that achieving 90% of test coverage is a great value for every software project. There may be software projects when achieving this is critical. There are other projects when doing something else is more important to deliver value to the customer. So yeah.
So how do we get there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we said that the DevOps is not only, so DevOps is a mindset. It's not about the tools, it's not about technologies, but in the end, if we want to do DevOps, yes, we need to learn the mindset. We need to shift the mindset of the developers, the operational people, the engineers, and the company. But we need also tools in the end, because the DevOps story is made by phases, like planning the work, like doing continuous integration, continuous deployment, doing testing. And to do this task, these activities, we need tools. We can't just do them with changing the mindset. So what we can use to do that today? So we can start with, well, the first phase should be always the planning. So you should, as we said, DevOps is first a culture change. So the first start of the project should be planning the work. Which tool do we have today to do something like that? What we can use? Well, GitHub, probably. It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. GitHub. Yeah. No, GitHub. I mean, GitHub. We have. Everyone knows GitHub. For open source projects, it's a great way to start planning your open source projects, because you have boards, you have the issues, you have the projects, so you have multiple ways to track your work and interact with the community. Also in Microsoft, there are many examples of teams who are planning in the open using GitHub. For example, from the Windows side, I can recall the WinUI team is using a lot GitHub to share the roadmap and public activities. And I'm pretty sure that many DevOps, the .NET team is doing the same. So yeah. What else? I
mean, we also have, obviously we have this on GitHub, but we have the same for the Azure DevOps server. Azure DevOps server. So there you have also boards, you have a repository, but you obviously don't need the repository for planning yet, but you have the boards and you have the wikis. So basically both those tools are the tools you would need for planning. And maybe a pen and a sheet of paper.
You can also create the Kanban board, so you can define stories, user stories, work items, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, once you started the planning, then, which is the next step, Mark?
Yeah, hopefully it's developing.
Well, maybe you're using DevOps for something else. I don't know.
Yeah. So usually the next step would be the development, and there we have many tools. Obviously we are in the Microsoft world, so we use the VS Net, the VS Code, Writer, or stuff like that. So those are great coding tools that can be extended to your needs. And we were talking about the shared responsibility. And for example, that's why both GitHub and the Azure DevOps are supporting configuring the build and release pipeline as code using YAML. So there's no obscure click and point adventure necessary. So the developers or the team itself can actually, product is being built and released on the build server. So this increases the coherence of the team and obviously also increases the quality of the product. And the good thing about that as well is that allows you to fail very fast on experiments, because this is something which is also something of the mindset which comes with DevOps, because now with the ultra short development cycles, you can have, let's say, little data-driven experiments where you see okay, let's try it that way, or you do A/B tests, so let's do it that way, and within a month or 2 months you get the result and see oh, was this beneficial for our product? No, it wasn't, so let's not do it this again. Or you see oh man, this is the next big thing, and then you can advance and focus on that. And this is basically all coming through the whole planning, developing, and obviously testing and stuff like that, which are the next steps we're going to describe?
For companies that are used to have agile development and DevOps approaches, I think that for every feature you see popping up in Facebook or Netflix or Twitter, there are probably other 50 that have been tested, validated, and discarded because it turned out that they weren't good ideas. But that's the only way to see if it's a good idea or not. It can be only the developer to say, oh no, yes, this is a good idea. Of course, for you it's a good idea, but you need to check if it's a good idea also for your users, your customers, and so on.
Yeah, and the developers are in charge of gathering the data if the experiment is actually working or not. So this is this is again about shared responsibility. So
and today with the also the developer story goes across the boundaries because we have also the concept of infrastructure as a code. So the idea is that now today also infrastructure stuff like defining a continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline can be done with code. We have the YAML syntax to build this kind of files where you describe, for example, which task you want to perform or the environment where to run your pipeline. And this helps to treat the infrastructure like if it's part of your code. So you can store it in a repository, you can version it, you can branch it, you can share it in an easier way.
And of course, it gives you repeatable results because this is very important for the monitoring and gathering the data. So now we have code, Matteo. What's next?
Well, now we have code, you can ship it, and that's it.
Easy. So podcast done for today.
Once you have the code, you should validate that your code is running well and it's working fine and it's not breaking anything. So as part of a solid DevOps mindset, you should also have testing as part of it because you should make sure that the code you are committing to the repository can produce a stable build, a working build. And here with testing, we can cover a lot of grounds because we can have the code testing, we can have the load testing, we can have the UI testing. So a lot of ways to understand if the code we are writing is good. Let's put it this way. Is there something on Azure that can help us to do this kind of testing?
Yeah, there are the Azure test plans. This is more for the explorative testing. You can have which is an interesting feature, especially for web apps and stuff like that, is you can have those so-called deployment slots on the app services, where you, for example, have of course, you have the ARM templates, which allow you to prepare the resource exactly the way you want it, and then you can push it to a certain
YAML file for the pipeline.
It's JSON, exactly.
Okay, a way to create infrastructure using code. Okay.
Exactly. So you define the infrastructure as JSON, and then you push it via command line or whatever to the Azure, and it will just spin up the virtual machine or the app servers or whatever. And then you have, if you're using like platform as a service, then you have the app service, for example, and there you can say like, okay, I do have different slots. Those slots are basically app services that work next to each other. Imagine you spin up, for example, like a production or the integration and the staging machine, and they are completely the same, except obviously for the host name. And you can test it. You can, for example, test the integration test, and then you can do basically like a flip over. So you don't need to do the redeployment again and maybe create a new build, but you can use exactly the same build and run this on your integration platform as well. So because it's all about repeatability and stuff like that. And if you start doing new builds, I mean, who is it the one who makes sure that the build you've just created is the same you created, for example, yesterday? So it's all about having, for example, testing thoroughly existing builds as well. So that's why we have the different slots in. We can have the different slots in app services. So yeah, that would be one approach for testing. What can you do with Windows if you want to test, for example, UI testing?
So in terms of Windows, well, it's code. So most of the kind of testing you can do applies also on Windows. What's specific on Windows is that since the UI part is very important, as you said, we can have also UI testing. We have a platform, Microsoft, called the WinAppDriver, which is based on the open source Selenium framework, which allows you to do coded UI tests. So you can write a unit test where instead of testing business logic, you test the UI. So you can simulate, I open this window, I click this button, I press this keyboard, this key on the keyboard, and you can validate that the UI is behaving as expected. WinAppDriver is it's a project on GitHub. The interesting thing is that this WinAppDriver is built inside the Windows images that we provide on Azure DevOps. So if you want to do UI testing for the Windows application, you don't have to install anything special. The hosted agents provided by Azure DevOps are ready for this kind of testing.
Yeah. Also, for just a quick note, for mobile development, we have an app service. We have some kind of like a real warehouse full of mobile devices that sits in Denmark, and you can do real device testing on various devices. For example, for Xamarin apps with the Xamarin UI test, but you can also obviously test Cordova apps and other things. So, sun is shining on your side? No, not anymore.
No. It was just a ray. Of...
Okay. So basically you are covered for the web stuff because you could use Selenium and the regular app services job. You can use the WinAppDriver and the prepared VM images on Azure for the Windows development, and you can use the app service. You can use the App Center mobile device testing if you want to test mobile devices. So we basically got you covered for many of the scenarios that are available.
Okay, so now we have tested our code. Our code is fine. So if we passed all the tests, what's the next step?
Well, we send the guys from Ops a mail and say it's their job now, and we are off for holidays, I assume.
I'm not sure this is really what DevOps is about. Yeah, can be also like that.
No, obviously. So the next step would obviously be the deployment to production, or I don't know, maybe you have staging before. So, but you have like the final deployment. We have the DevOps release, Azure DevOps release pipelines for that, which are defined in YAML as well, same as GitHub Actions.
We talked about different stages, like I want to deploy my application production test in QA environment. Okay.
Yeah, and you also, so basically, you can also build your, let's say, your own release pipeline where you, for example, want to have your team lead to make sure everything is fine. So he needs to manually approve the release and stuff like that. So you can have, for example, like this approval workflow, so to say, where maybe like 4 eyes or 6 eyes have to approve the release. Obviously,
so automatic. Gates. So like, if I'm not mistaken, you can have also gates where other than the manual approval, you can have also coded tests. Like, okay, in order to deploy this in production, I can check, I don't know, the backlog, and there shouldn't be any open bug or work item assigned to that. Or I can run a scan for open source vulnerabilities, and the deployment happens only if no issues are found, stuff like that. Yeah,
for example. Yeah, so you have, I mean, many ways, and there are probably many ideas on how to improve the release pipeline. Well, because in the simplest way, it's basically like take the artifact, once it builds and passed all the tests, take the artifact and deploy it to my target machine. But obviously, in the real world, there are a couple of things that happen in between. I mean, be it vulnerability scans or be it your team lead wants to approve and get all the fame for the release. So yeah.
Okay.
Anything else that should happen on the cloud side? No, not really. I mean, it's this is probably releasing.
I guess in this scenario, ARM templates can be helpful because with the idea of recreating dev environments, Q&A environments, having a way to automate the creation process and use the same configuration for each step can help.
Yeah. I might want to add, however, that recreating your production machine is probably not the best idea, at least, well, with the second and third and fourth attempt.
Yeah, probably no.
Always wipe your database, kids. Always wipe your database.
The AppConsult podcast that said that we need to recreate the production environment every time.
Yeah, and the other guy said wipe your database, which is very important.
Yeah, because we will create everything from scratch, no worries.
Yeah. So what could you do for deployment on the Windows side?
So in terms of continuous integration, the story for Windows is pretty much the same as for every other project. The real difference is on the deployment, because the challenge is that compared to, I don't know, a web application or a backend, with a Windows application, let's say that you have 5,000 customers, it means that you have 5,000 copies of the application to update. So that's the main challenge. Some of the technologies that Microsoft have released in the last months, years, can help to make this easier, mainly MSIX and App Installer. MSIX is the new packaging technology introduced in Windows 10. App Installer is the technologies that allows to enable the automatic installation of these packages in Windows 10. And with App Installer, you can enable, for example, automatic updates even in a non-managed environment. So if you want, one great way is to use the Microsoft Store. So you can publish, you can have a pipeline which creates an MSX package and publish it on the Microsoft Store. Microsoft Store has automatic updates turned on, so automatically users will get the app. But if you are in a scenario like Enterprise where you can't use the store, with App Installer you can even upload the MSX package on a website or on a network share and deliver automatic updates to your users. So it's a great fit if you want to enable continuous deployment of updates that you deliver. It's important also to keep in mind the code signing story, because Windows applications compared to a website, they always need to be signed with a trusted certificate. So it's always important to keep this as part of the deployment process.
Yeah, well, obviously the certificates thingy or is a thing of the web projects as well, because you still have now that I think every major browser requires HTTPS connections per default, and mobile devices don't even accept unencrypted connections anymore. So this is part of the team obviously as well, because this is part of your shared responsibility. You have to make sure that the target machine where you are deploying to is basically set up and provides you the right certificate. So yeah, one thing though, because this is out of my experience, from my experience, I had a customer maybe like 3 or 4 years ago who was very into the whole automation thing. It was, although because I'm from the mobile side, he was like a mobile customer, and he was basically trying to set up his entire release pipeline without any human interference. So he was basically pushing the updates to the different stores through his build server. I have to admit, I told him before, please at least have a check before you finally hit the button. He said like, no, and obviously, yeah, it didn't work as expected. So he basically botched completely, like a complete release of updates I think what was on 12th of December, so that was not the very best timing, I have to admit. But yeah, after that, he followed my advice.
This is why the other steps the previous steps are very important, because to have the confidence to continuously deploy your project, you need to be confident that what you are deploying is good, that you aren't deploying bugs, that you are deploying breaking changes, that you are,
Well, that was basically like a human error before. It could happen to everyone. They just basically simply missed the copying of the assets into the app packages. So basically, they just delivered everything without. And who needs pictures in apps?
For mobile and desktop application through a store, for sure, there is also the complexity that, well, the advantage of DevOps in this scenario is that once you find an error like this, solving the problem and getting a new build is very easy.
Yeah.
When it comes to mobile application, there's this this blocker of the validation process of a store, which is not exactly a 1 minute turnaround. So you might be able to get a new build in 5 minutes, but then you needed to push it through the store, which usually takes a little bit more than 5 minutes.
Except, I think it has changed to now, but Google was not having this like manual approval, and that's why this one went through without the images. And Apple obviously were the ones who said like, your app looks weird, so that's why. Yeah, and this is basically what you just said. Like, it was a couple of days before Christmas, and so they had to basically redo the new build. It was basically like the next build was done within 10 minutes because they just had to copy the pictures again. But the approval process just took basically after Christmas, so they weren't able to ship their products in time.
Okay.
So yeah, always check your releases, kids.
So once we have deployed, we are good to go. The application is gone, is live, so we are good to go.
Yeah. I mean, job's done, right? It's Christmas.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Always deploy on Friday.
or the Christmas Eve can be also.
Yeah, exactly. So now the next step obviously would be the whole operation process, and this one. So this one is pretty much like webbed into the next or last step, which would be the monitoring, because like if you do the operating, you always have to monitor as well, because like you have to look for peaks, you have to look for memory leaks, because this is valuable feedback that then goes back to your planning, because you probably need to address those issues.
You have to look for errors.
Yeah.
Collect analytics, because I mean, we are all users. If you expect your users to give you feedback, I mean, there are only two ways to get the feedback. Or you did something extraordinarily good, and then everyone is excited and they give you feedback. Or you did something extraordinarily bad, you broke everything, and the customers will start complaining and attacking you and giving feedback about this is not working. Everything in the middle is a no. So relying only on the manual user feedback to iterate and improve your projects is not the best idea in the world. So this is also where analytics, event detection, A/B testing, usage of features can be helpful to validate that your idea or your feature is really good or not.
Exactly. And we would basically use the Azure Monitor or Application Insight for that to gather the data. And I mean, there are obviously stuff like user voice, which is probably helpful, and put it into your app or website so a user can basically complain immediately or just give you like thumbs up. Sometimes that happens. But as Matteo said, the real feedback is the numbers you get through your telemetry, your memory usage, your CPU usage, the amount of connections and stuff like that. And obviously, who doesn't love management dashboards? So you can have this data obviously in JSON and read it there. As a developer, I expect you to do this, but For everyone else, it's Power BI, where you can, just an example, there are a couple of Grafana. It's also an amazing tool to display those things. It also works out of the box with Azure. So Power BI or something like which gives you like a immediate overview of the amount of errors in the last 24 hours and or crashes and stuff like that. When this one is really valuable for your next planning phase. What would you do with Windows?
So on the Windows side, but generally speaking, also on the client side. So I would say mobile application. Visual Studio App Center is a great resource because it gives you an SDK for all the major platforms, Windows, Android, iOS, multiple development technologies. So, for example, Android and iOS, it can be native development, it can be React Native. On Windows, it can be UWP, can be WPF, and so on. You get these SDKs, which enables you to track analytics in an anonymous way, to track events. So let's say you want to know how many people click on the button or visited a specific section of your app. And also in this case, you get insights inside the dashboard. You get also automatic log of crashes. So whenever your application crashes, you get the full stack trace. So it's a very powerful product to improve your application and see what's going on. Okay.
So one final question.
Yeah.
How do we measure success with our DevOps approach?
How we measure success? The satisfaction of the customer.
Oh yeah, that is actually like a good one. I was about to suggest like maybe feature deliveries per year, because you can't basically cheat shipping. But I mean, I think much better metric would be customer satisfaction. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the end, as we said in the beginning, the goal is to deliver value to your customer.
Yeah.
If we ship 1,000 features per year, but none of them fully satisfies the requirements of the customer, it's not much use. For sure, delivering 1,000 features per year is a good indication, at least, that you are doing DevOps in the right way.
And you can still hope like having luck through numbers by just
among these 1,000 features, maybe one or two that your customers like.
Yeah, one will stick.
That's a very good point indeed. Yeah. Okay, so I think we covered pretty much everything around everything. I mean, this was just a really high-level overview to give you some insights on the kind of challenges and the kind of situations we find ourselves in when we work with customers around DevOps in the AppConsult team. Of course, this is not comprehensive at all, because DevOps is a huge box, and every step we share, the plan, develop, test, can be analyzed in a very, very deep way. There are tons of tools, there are tons of platforms. Here today we have talked only about what we can do with the most popular ones in the Microsoft ecosystem, like Azure DevOps, GitHub, and so on. But there are tons of tools, tons of platforms in the market that can integrate together. So this is why it's important to have first the mindset, because the tooling comes next after you have a good idea of what you want to achieve. If you start from the tooling and then you try to change the mindset, the DevOps can become the worst failure of your company. So before wrapping up the podcast, let's talk 5 minutes about Build, about what's happening at Build. So next week, starting from May 19, Microsoft Build 2020 will start. The main difference this year is pretty obvious due to the COVID-19 situation. Traveling is impossible. Organizing a mass conference with more than 5,000 people is impossible. So Build has turned into a digital experience. It will be digital only, and it will be free and open to everyone, every developer in the world. So it will be a new format, and it will be pretty interesting because it won't be just streaming sessions and keynotes, but there are a lot of activities organized around Build, which will be interactive. They will allow the attendees to interact with Microsoft. One of them is being organized by the AppConsult team, which is the one-to-one app consultation. So you will be able to schedule a consultation with nice people like me and Mark. So there will be a tool where you will be able to select one of the categories we are going to support. We're going to support 8 categories, I think. Mark, is it correct?
I don't know, a couple of Azure and a couple of desktop development. So I think.
Yeah, we are covering Azure categories, so infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, AKS. We are covering client development, so we are covering cross-platform, dev, web, Windows, and so on. And you will be able to schedule a 45 minutes consultation with one expert that will help you in understanding better the product, in reviewing the architecture of your projects, in helping to solve an issue that, or also just getting some guidance around, I don't know, modernization or architecture reviews and so on.
The good thing is, we are doing this for 85 hours without end. So it's basically like just one big consultation for.
Yeah, we are going to run this for basically all the engineers, all the experts will be spread all around the world. Yeah. So we will cover all the time zones, and basically, yes, we run 24 hours per day during the build days. And based on your time zone, you will be able to find someone that will be able to help you. So if you are interested into this, well, generally speaking, the first advice is go to the Build website. So look for Microsoft Build on your favorite search engine, or if I'm not mistaken, the website should be mybuild.microsoft.com. Go there, register. You have to register. It's free, but you have to register. And from now, the overall dashboard that will give you access to all the tools is not live yet, but start to register, and then in the coming days, when the tool will open, you will be able to start the process to book a consultation.
When will the registration page open for the one-on-one with us AppConsult?
We don't know yet, so it will be before Build for sure, but it will be somewhere between next week and the beginning of the next one. Yeah, we don't know the exact date yet.
Okay.
Keep an eye on the website and for sure when
or on Twitter. I guess we will tweet about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, yes, keep an eye on the official channel, like Microsoft channels, the Build channels, the Build website, and also our social networks. So we will let you know when this will be live. So it's a free opportunity. Usually our teams, we were doing this in the past years in the physical Build, but of course it was a limited experience because only the participants of the Build were able to take advantage of this opportunity. Now instead we are going to open it for free to the worldwide world. So if you are interested, take advantage of this.
There's, however, no shirt this year.
No, unfortunately, no. We go. Well, my wife, I think, will be happy that I won't come back home with my usual 12, 15 shirts from every Microsoft product released.
I think Samsonite is going to be very, very sad because I'm not buying a new luggage.
Yeah. No, this year, no swag, unfortunately. Yeah, and no meeting my awesome team. I mean, I like virtual, and for sure doing virtual things is better than not doing it, since we don't have any option now. But I will miss for sure the real event. But I think the Build team, I don't know if you saw the tweets from Scott Hanselman and other people involved. They are working really, really, really hard to make this digital build experience the best possible one, despite all the limitations that our current situation implies. Okay, I think we can wrap up here. We already have another podcast episode scheduled for the end of the month. We share all the details, and we will talk about the build announcements. So build will just happen, so we will see from the Windows and the Azure side what was announced, which are the most interesting things. Okay.
We could tell you already, but we are not allowed to.
No, exactly. Sorry. Do we know?
I think so.
I think so. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Thanks everyone for staying with us until now. So follow us on YouTube and on the other channel. We'll keep you updated with everything. Have a great one. Bye.
Stay safe.